The screams echoed through the mining shafts of Kepler 442b as another human collapsed from exhaustion. Marcus Chen watched helplessly as his friend David was dragged away by the Vortac guards, their six-legged forms clicking against the metal flooring. The alien overseers showed no mercy to those who could no longer work. David had been with them for 3 years, ever since the conquest of Earth. Marcus gripped his plasma cutter tighter and returned to his work on the asteroid fragments. The irony wasn't lost on him that humans were forced to mine the very materials used to build weapons against other species. For the past 50 years, humanity had served as the backbone of the Galactic Council's labor force, deemed perfect for dangerous work due to their resilience and adaptability. The Galactic Council had arrived at Earth in 2174 with overwhelming force. Their message was simple: surrender and serve, or be exterminated. Humanity, still confined to their solar system and barely beginning to explore beyond Mars, had no choice. The Council's technology was centuries ahead of human science. Their ships could glass entire continents in minutes, and their soldiers were bred for war across dozens of worlds. What made humans valuable wasn't their intelligence or technology, but their stubborn refusal to die. While other species wilted under harsh conditions or succumbed to despair, humans adapted. They survived in environments that killed stronger aliens, worked longer hours than species with superior physiology, and somehow maintained their sanity in situations that drove others mad. The Vortac particularly prized human workers. Their own species was fragile, requiring controlled environments and specific atmospheric conditions. Humans could work in near vacuum, extreme heat, crushing gravity, and toxic atmospheres with minimal life support. They were the perfect slaves for dangerous extraction operations. Marcus remembered his life before the conquest. He had been an engineer working on humanity's first faster-than-light engine prototype. The project was shelved when the Council arrived, but Marcus never forgot the principles. During his years in bondage, he had quietly observed alien technology, learning their systems while pretending to be just another ignorant laborer. The work shift ended with the familiar sound of the collection bell. Marcus joined the shuffling line of exhausted humans making their way back to the dormitory complex. The facility housed nearly 10,000 human workers, all serving different functions across the massive mining operation. Some worked the deep shafts, others processed materials in the refineries, and a few maintained the automated systems that kept the operation running. In the dormitory, Marcus found his usual spot next to Sarah Martinez, a former military officer who had become an informal leader among the humans. She had managed to maintain some semblance of organization and morale among their people, despite the Vortac's efforts to break their spirits. "Any word from the other sectors?" Marcus asked quietly as they shared their daily ration of nutrient paste. Sarah glanced around carefully before responding. Section 7 lost another dozen workers to the atmospheric processor failure. The Vortac are pushing quotas harder than ever. Something's got them spooked. Marcus had noticed the increased tension among their overseers as well. The Vortac guards seemed more aggressive, and there had been several high-ranking council officials visiting the facility in recent weeks. Emergency meetings were being held in the administrative sectors, always behind heavily guarded doors. "I overheard one of the technicians talking," Sarah continued. "There's been trouble at the outer rim colonies. Species going dark, entire systems losing communication with the Council." This was significant news. The Galactic Council controlled over 2,000 star systems, with dozens of client species providing resources, labor, and military support. For entire systems to go silent suggested either massive technical failures or something far worse. That night, as the dormitory lights dimmed to simulate evening, Marcus lay on his thin sleeping mat and stared at the ceiling. Through the small window, he could see the distant stars, many of which now hosted human populations in bondage. Earth itself had been strip-mined of its most valuable resources and now served primarily as a breeding ground for replacement workers. His thoughts were interrupted by a commotion in the corridor outside. Heavy footsteps and urgent alien voices suggested something unusual was happening. Marcus quietly made his way to the window facing the administrative complex and saw something that made his blood run cold. Council ships were landing in unprecedented numbers. Not the usual transport vessels that brought supplies and collected materials, but warships. massive dreadnoughts and carrier vessels that Marcus recognized from intelligence briefings during Earth's brief resistance. These were the ships used to conquer worlds, not manage mining operations. The next morning brought chaos to the facility. Human work schedules were suspended, and all personnel were confined to dormitories while Vortac guards conducted extensive security sweeps. The aliens seemed to be preparing for something, but their usual smugness had been replaced by barely concealed panic. Marcus used the confusion to slip into the facility's data network through a maintenance terminal he had been gradually modifying over the past year. His engineering background had served him well in understanding alien computer systems, and he had slowly built a backdoor into their communications array. What he found in the intercepted transmissions changed everything. The Outer Rim systems hadn't just gone dark due to technical failures or local rebellions. They were being systematically destroyed by something the Council called the Devourers. From the fragmented reports Marcus could access, these entities consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing but empty space behind. They moved through space at impossible speeds and seemed immune to all conventional weapons. More alarming was the pattern of their advance. The Devourers weren't attacking randomly. They were moving in a direct line toward the galactic core, consuming everything in their path. At their current rate of advance, they would reach the inner systems, including this mining facility, within 6 months. The Council was in full panic mode. Emergency sessions were being held across their territory as they desperately sought solutions. Their greatest military minds were failing to develop effective countermeasures. Species that had served the Council for centuries were beginning to revolt, believing their overlords could no longer protect them. Marcus spent the next several days gathering more intelligence while maintaining his cover as a simple laborer. The picture that emerged was of an empire in collapse. The Council's arrogance had left them unprepared for a threat they couldn't simply overwhelm with superior numbers and technology. But the most interesting discovery came from an intercepted communication between the facility commander and Council headquarters. The message discussed alternative resources and unconventional solutions to the Devourer threat. There were references to studying human psychological profiles and combat effectiveness during Earth's conquest. It seemed the Council was beginning to realize that their perfect slaves might possess qualities beyond simple endurance. The breakthrough came when Marcus accessed a restricted file containing analysis of human military performance during the conquest. The report made fascinating reading. Despite being hopelessly outgunned, human forces had inflicted casualties far beyond what Council strategists had predicted. Human tactics were described as unpredictable, adaptive, and persistently aggressive despite overwhelming odds. What caught Marcus's attention was a section on human innovation under pressure. The report noted that humans had developed new technologies and strategies at an unprecedented rate during the conflict, often finding solutions to problems that had stumped other species for decades. The Council had dismissed this as desperation rather than recognizing it as a fundamental human characteristic. The aliens had made a critical error in their assessment of humanity. They saw endurance and adaptability as perfect traits for laborers, but they failed to understand that these same qualities made humans natural survivors and innovators. More importantly, they had underestimated human capacity for coordinated resistance. Marcus began reaching out to other human workers through carefully coded messages hidden in work reports. Sarah's military network proved invaluable in establishing secure communications across the facility. What they discovered was remarkable. Humans throughout the Council's territory had been quietly preparing for an opportunity to strike back. Engineers had been studying alien technology while pretending to perform maintenance. Scientists had been conducting secret research using materials from their work assignments. Former military personnel had been training other humans in combat techniques during their limited free time. Even simple laborers had been gathering intelligence about facility weaknesses and guard rotations. 50 years of bondage hadn't broken humanity's spirit. It had given them unprecedented access to alien technology and infrastructure while teaching them patience and strategic thinking. The Council had unknowingly placed their most dangerous enemies in the heart of their industrial and military complex. But Marcus knew that knowledge alone wouldn't be enough. They needed an opportunity to act, and the Devourer threat might provide exactly that. If the Council was desperate enough to consider unconventional solutions, humanity needed to be ready to offer one that would serve their own interests. The facility's communication array could be modified to contact other human populations across Council space. With Sarah's help, Marcus began planning a network that could coordinate resistance activities across dozens of worlds simultaneously. The engineering challenges were significant, but Marcus had learned much about alien technology during his years of captivity. 3 weeks after the warships first arrived, the opportunity they had been waiting for finally presented itself. A Council emergency conference was scheduled at the facility, bringing together military leaders and scientists from across the sector. The meeting would discuss new strategies for dealing with the Devourer threat, and Marcus suspected that human labor forces would be among the topics discussed. The night before the conference, Marcus made his way to the communication array using access codes he had gradually acquired over the past month. The modifications he needed to make would take several hours and required disabling several security systems. If he was caught, the consequences would be severe for all humans at the facility. Working by the light of his handheld scanner, Marcus carefully rerouted communication protocols and installed his backdoor programs. The array could now transmit coded messages across the galaxy using normal administrative channels. More importantly, it could receive responses without triggering security alerts. By dawn, Marcus had successfully established contact with human resistance cells on 17 different worlds. The response was overwhelming. Humans across the galaxy had been waiting for exactly this kind of coordination. Engineers, scientists, military personnel, and even simple workers were ready to contribute to a coordinated effort. The picture that emerged from these initial contacts was staggering. Humans had infiltrated virtually every level of Council infrastructure. They maintained critical systems, operated essential facilities, and had access to classified information across the Empire. The Council's decision to use humans as universal laborers had given them presence in locations their enemies could never reach. Marcus returned to his dormitory as the morning work assignments were being announced. The Council conference would begin in a few hours, and he needed to be ready for whatever opportunities it might present. Sarah had positioned trusted humans throughout the facility to monitor alien activities and report any developments. The conference began with a series of increasingly desperate presentations from Council military commanders. The Devourers had consumed another 3 systems in the past week, and their advance showed no signs of slowing. Conventional weapons were completely ineffective, and attempts to communicate with the entities had failed utterly. Marcus listened to the proceedings through the monitoring devices Sarah's network had installed in the conference facility. The Council's greatest minds were failing to develop any viable solutions. Species that had served the Empire for centuries were beginning to abandon outer colonies and retreat toward the galactic core. Then came the presentation that Marcus had been expecting. A Vortex scientist proposed utilizing human populations as expendable scouts and researchers in direct contact with the Devourers. The logic was coldly practical. Humans were resilient enough to survive brief contact with the entities, and their loss would not significantly impact Council military capabilities. The proposal was met with enthusiastic support from military commanders who saw it as a way to gather intelligence without risking valuable alien lives. Plans were quickly developed for deploying human research units to systems under Devourer attack. But Marcus smiled as he listened to the discussion. The Council was about to make the same mistake they had made 50 years ago. They were underestimating humanity. They saw humans as expendable tools rather than thinking beings capable of independent action and planning. The conference ended with orders for immediate implementation of the human deployment program. Marcus had less than 24 hours to coordinate with the resistance network before Council forces began gathering human populations for transport to the front lines. That night, as the facility prepared for the massive logistical operation ahead, Marcus sent coded messages across the galaxy. The time for preparation was over. Humanity's moment had finally arrived. The response from the resistance network was immediate and unanimous. They were ready. 50 years of bondage was about to end, but not in the way the Galactic Council expected. They thought they were sending humans to die gathering intelligence about an unstoppable enemy. Instead, they were about to discover that humanity's greatest strength had never been their endurance or adaptability. It was their refusal to accept defeat, even when facing impossible odds. Marcus looked out at the stars one final time before the facility's lights dimmed for the night. Somewhere out there, the Devourers were consuming worlds and destroying an empire that had seemed invincible. But they were about to encounter something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that grew stronger under pressure and more dangerous when cornered. The Galactic Council had spent 5 decades trying to break humanity's spirit through bondage and oppression. Instead, they had forged them into the perfect weapon for the crisis they now faced. And Marcus Chen, former engineer turned slave turned resistance coordinator, was about to help his species claim their freedom by saving the very empire that had enslaved them. The irony was perfect, and Marcus couldn't help but smile as he closed his eyes and prepared for the chaos that tomorrow would bring. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity was truly capable of when they stopped pretending to be broken. The transport ships arrived at dawn, their massive cargo holds designed to carry equipment and resources now repurposed for human cargo. Marcus watched from the dormitory window as hundreds of his fellow humans were loaded onto the vessels like livestock. The Vortac guards showed their usual efficiency, processing each worker through biometric scanners and assigning them to specific ships based on their work classifications. Sarah Martinez stood beside him, her jaw clenched as she watched their people being prepared for what the council believed would be certain death. The resistance cells are in position across all 7 transport ships, she reported quietly. Our people know what to do when they reach the deployment zone. Marcus nodded, his mind focused on the complex coordination required for their plan. Over the past 24 hours, the Human Resistance Network had accomplished something unprecedented. They had established synchronized communication across 43 worlds, with backup protocols in place for another dozen systems. Every human population in Council space was now connected through a web of encrypted channels hidden within normal administrative communications. The scale of their preparation was staggering. Engineers had identified critical vulnerabilities in Council infrastructure on every major world. Scientists had developed countermeasures for alien security systems and weapons. Military personnel had trained thousands of workers in basic combat techniques and sabotage operations. Even simple laborers had memorized detailed intelligence about facility layouts and guard rotations. But the most impressive achievement was the psychological warfare campaign they had quietly conducted over the past 5 decades. Humans had convinced their alien overseers that they were broken, obedient, and incapable of coordinated resistance. The Council's arrogance had made them blind to the growing network of defiance operating under their very noses. Marcus's own assignment to the research expedition was no accident. His engineering background and access to the facility's communication systems made him ideal for coordinating resistance activities during the mission. Sarah would remain behind to manage operations at the mining facility, while trusted humans aboard each transport ship would serve as local commanders. The loading process took most of the morning. Marcus found himself assigned to Transport 7, along with 49 other humans selected for their technical skills and supposed expendability. The ship's manifest listed them as research support personnel, a designation that would have been laughable under other circumstances. As the transport ship lifted off from the mining facility's landing platform, Marcus settled into his assigned seat and activated the concealed communication device hidden in his work toolkit. The device was a masterpiece of human engineering, designed to interface with alien systems while appearing completely innocuous to security scans. Contact with the resistance network was established within minutes. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy as human populations confirmed their readiness for coordinated action. The scope of their infiltration was remarkable. Humans had access to power generation facilities, communication arrays, weapons manufacturing plants, and even some military installations. The journey to the deployment zone took 6 days, during which Marcus and his team used their access to the transport ship systems to gather critical intelligence about Council military operations. The aliens' desperation was evident in every communication they intercepted. The Devourers had accelerated their advance, consuming 12 more systems in the past week alone. More troubling were reports of panic spreading throughout the inner colonies. Several client species had openly rebelled against Council authority, believing their overlords could no longer provide protection. The Empire's carefully maintained hierarchy was beginning to collapse under pressure from an enemy they couldn't understand or fight effectively. But Marcus also detected something else in the intercepted communications. hints that the Council suspected human involvement in recent security breaches across multiple facilities. References to anomalous activity patterns and irregular data access suggested that their resistance network might have been partially compromised. "They're getting suspicious," Marcus reported to Sarah during their nightly communication window. "We may need to accelerate our timeline." "Agreed," Sarah responded. Intelligence from other facilities suggests increased security monitoring of human work assignments. "They're not sure what we're doing, but they know something's changed." The deployment zone was a system called Kepler 1649, located approximately 50 light-years from the galactic core. 3 planets had been consumed by the Devourers 2 weeks earlier, leaving behind empty space and debris fields that defied conventional physics. Council scientists hoped that human observers might detect patterns or phenomena that alien sensors had missed. As Transport 7 dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, Marcus got his first look at the aftermath of a Devourer attack. The sight was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Where planets should have been, there was simply nothing. Not debris, not radiation signatures, just empty space that seemed somehow wrong to observe. The other transport ships took positions throughout the system, deploying human teams to various observation points and research stations. The Council's plan was simple: scatter humans across the affected area and monitor their vital signs until either they made useful observations or the Devourers consumed them as well. What the Council didn't know was that each human team was equipped with more than just standard observation equipment. Hidden among their supplies were sophisticated sensors designed to detect and analyze the quantum signatures that preliminary intelligence suggested might be associated with Devourer activity. Marcus's team was assigned to Research Station Alpha, a hastily constructed platform orbiting the position where the system's primary star should have been. The star itself was gone, consumed along with everything else, but the station's sensors detected residual energy patterns that might provide clues about Devourer capabilities. The station was staffed by a mixture of human researchers and alien supervisors, with heavily armed council guards maintaining security. The aliens made no effort to hide their belief that the humans were expendable test subjects rather than genuine researchers. But, within hours of arrival, Marcus and his team had established contact with human populations throughout the deployment zone. What they discovered changed everything they thought they knew about the Devourer threat. The aliens weren't random destroyers consuming matter for energy or resources. They were intelligent entities conducting a systematic evaluation of galactic civilizations. The consumption of worlds was simply the most efficient method of gathering comprehensive data about each species and their technological capabilities. More importantly, the humans' unique perspective as both observers and subjects of galactic civilization allowed them to detect patterns that pure Council scientists had missed. The Devourers weren't destroying indiscriminately, they were testing the responses of different species to crisis situations. "They're looking for something specific," Marcus reported during a coded transmission to Sarah. "Each attack follows the same pattern: overwhelming force followed by detailed analysis of defensive responses. They're not just destroying worlds, they're studying how each species reacts to existential threats." This revelation changed the entire strategic situation. If the Devourers were evaluating galactic civilizations rather than simply destroying them, then there might be criteria for survival that the Council had failed to understand. More importantly, humanity's unique position as enslaved observers might give them insights that no other species possessed. Marcus shared this analysis with resistance cells across the deployment zone, and the response was immediate. Human teams began conducting their own parallel research, using concealed equipment to gather data that their alien supervisors couldn't access. The picture that emerged was both terrifying and hopeful. The Devourers were indeed intelligent, and their consumption of worlds was part of a larger evaluation process. But they weren't omnipotent. Their advance had slowed in several sectors where they encountered unexpected resistance or phenomena that required additional analysis. Most intriguingly, there were indications that the Devourers might be responsive to certain types of communication or demonstration. The key appeared to be proving that a civilization possessed qualities worth preserving, but the Council's arrogant and hierarchical approach had failed to understand what those qualities might be. 2 weeks into the deployment, Marcus made a discovery that would reshape humanity's strategy. Hidden in the quantum signatures detected by their concealed sensors was evidence of communication attempts from the Devourers. The entities were trying to establish contact, but the Council's rigid communication protocols were preventing meaningful exchange. The alien bureaucracy that governed Council communications was designed for managing an empire, not for first contact with truly alien intelligence. Their systems automatically filtered and categorized all incoming signals according to predetermined parameters, discarding anything that didn't match expected patterns. But human communication systems, developed independently and refined through decades of hidden resistance coordination, were more flexible and adaptive. Marcus realized that humans might be able to establish contact with the Devourers where the Council had failed. The implications were staggering. If humanity could communicate with the entities consuming the galaxy, they might be able to negotiate not just for their own survival, but for a complete restructuring of galactic civilization. The key was doing it without alerting the Council to their capabilities until it was too late for the aliens to interfere. Marcus began working with human teams throughout the deployment zone to develop a communication protocol that could interface with Devourer quantum signatures. The engineering challenges were immense, but humanity's greatest advantage had always been their ability to innovate under pressure. 3 days later, they achieved first contact. The initial exchange was brief and largely incomprehensible, consisting of mathematical concepts and physical constants that served as a universal foundation for communication. But subsequent attempts were more successful, establishing basic protocols for information exchange. What the humans learned from these communications was revolutionary. The Devourers were not destroyers but gardeners, tasked with maintaining the health of galactic civilization over geological timescales. They consumed worlds and species that had become stagnant or destructive, while preserving those that demonstrated potential for continued growth and positive contribution to galactic development. The Galactic Council, with its rigid hierarchy and oppressive policies, had been marked for elimination. But individual species within the Council's territory could still qualify for preservation if they demonstrated the right characteristics: adaptability, innovation, cooperation, and, most importantly, the ability to grow beyond their current limitations. Humanity, despite being enslaved and oppressed, had continued to demonstrate exactly these qualities. Their resistance network was proof of their adaptability and cooperation. Their technological innovations during the deployment mission showed their capacity for growth under pressure. Most importantly, their success in establishing communication with the Devourers proved they could transcend the limitations imposed by their current circumstances. Marcus realized that humanity was being offered a test, and possibly salvation, but they would need to act quickly. The Devourers' evaluation of the Galactic Council was nearly complete, and the final judgment would come soon. The first step was coordinating a simultaneous uprising across all human populations in Council space. The resistance network they had built over 5 decades made this possible, but the timing would be critical. They needed to demonstrate humanity's independence from the Council while the Devourers were still observing and evaluating. Begin Phase 1, Marcus transmitted to Sarah and the other resistance coordinators across the galaxy. All cells execute on my mark. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across 43 star systems, human populations simultaneously seized control of critical infrastructure. Power plants, communication arrays, manufacturing facilities, and even some military installations fell to coordinated human action within hours. The uprising wasn't random violence or destruction. Every action was carefully planned to demonstrate human capabilities while minimizing unnecessary casualties. The goal was liberation, not revenge, though the distinction was lost on many of their former overseers. On Research Station Alpha, Marcus's team moved with precision honed by months of preparation. The alien guards were neutralized using techniques that left them unconscious but alive. The Council supervisors found themselves confined to quarters while humans took control of the research equipment and communication systems. Similar scenes played out across the deployment zone as human teams revealed their true capabilities. The shocked alien researchers discovered that their expendable test subjects had been conducting their own parallel investigations, with equipment and techniques far more sophisticated than anything the Council had provided. But the most significant action took place at the Galactic Communication Array on Proxima Station, a massive facility that coordinated Council communications across their entire territory. Sarah Martinez had positioned a team of human engineers and technicians within the facility over the past year, and their takeover was flawlessly executed. With control of the Galactic Communication Array, humanity could finally demonstrate their true achievement to the Devourers. The coordinated uprising across dozens of worlds, accomplished without advanced technology or military superiority, was proof of exactly the kind of organizational ability and cooperative spirit that the entities valued. Marcus established direct communication with the Devourers using the Array's powerful transmission systems. The conversation that followed would determine not just humanity's fate, but the future of galactic civilization itself. "We are the species you observed in Bondage," Marcus transmitted, using the communication protocols they had developed during first contact. "We offer ourselves for evaluation as an independent civilization, not as subjects of the Galactic Council." The response came immediately, carrying overtones of surprise and approval that the human communication team had learned to interpret. "Your demonstration of cooperative action under adversity has been observed and recorded. Your ability to transcend imposed limitations while maintaining moral constraints shows promising development potential. The Galactic Council marked our species for eternal servitude," Marcus continued. "We request the opportunity to prove that humanity deserves a different fate. The Council's evaluation has been completed. Their rigidity and oppressive policies mark them for necessary recycling. Individual species within their territory will be evaluated separately. Your species shows unusual promise, but verification of your long-term potential will require extended observation." Marcus felt his heart racing as he processed the implications. The Devourers were offering humanity a chance at survival and freedom, but they would need to prove themselves worthy over an extended period. More importantly, the entities were willing to work with humans rather than simply making unilateral decisions about their fate. What would such verification require? Marcus asked. Demonstration of sustained cooperative development without external oppression. Your species must show ability to maintain positive growth patterns when granted freedom and resources. Additionally, you must prove capability to contribute constructively to broader galactic civilization. The terms were challenging but achievable. Humanity would need to govern themselves successfully while contributing to the larger galactic community. Most importantly, they would need to do it without falling into the same patterns of oppression and stagnation that had doomed the Council. "We accept these terms," Marcus responded. "But we will require time to establish independent governance and demonstrate our capabilities. Time will be provided. Council authority will be terminated within standard galactic periods. Human populations will be granted administrative control of captured territories for evaluation purposes. Success will result in permanent independence and full membership in galactic civilization. Failure will result in recycling with the Council." The conversation ended with technical details about the transition process and evaluation criteria. Marcus sat back in his chair, hardly able to believe what had just occurred. In the span of a few hours, humanity had gone from enslaved laborers to potential inheritors of a galactic empire. But the challenges ahead were enormous. Humans would need to take control of dozens of star systems, establish effective governance across widely scattered populations, and prove they could manage advanced alien technology without destroying themselves or others. Most importantly, they would need to do all of this while being constantly observed and evaluated by entities capable of consuming entire worlds. Marcus opened a communication channel to every human resistance cell in the galaxy. "Phase 2 begins now," he announced. "We're no longer fighting for freedom. We're fighting to prove we deserve it." The response from across the galaxy was immediate and determined. 50 years of bondage had prepared humanity for exactly this moment. They had learned patience, cooperation, and innovation under the worst possible circumstances. Now they had the opportunity to show the galaxy what they could accomplish when those chains were finally removed. The Galactic Council's reign was ending, but humanity's story was just beginning. 3 months after the liberation, Marcusjan stood on the command deck of the newly christened Human Unity, watching as the last Vorthac transport ships departed from Kepler 442b. The mining facility that had been his prison for 6 years was now the headquarters of the human resistance, transformed into a coordination center for the massive undertaking of governing 43 star systems. The transition had not been smooth. When the Devourers announced the termination of Council authority, panic swept through the alien populations. Some species fled toward the Galactic Rim, while others attempted to establish their own independent governments. A few tried to maintain the old hierarchies with themselves in control rather than the Council. But humanity's response had been different. Their resistance network, refined over 50 years of hidden coordination, provided a ready-made administrative structure that could be rapidly scaled up to manage interstellar governance. More importantly, their experience as universal laborers gave them practical knowledge of how every critical system in the former Council territory actually functioned. Status report from Proxima Station, Sarah Martinez announced as she joined Marcus at the observation window. She now served as coordinator for the inner systems, managing the complex logistics of feeding and housing billions of beings across dozens of worlds. The agricultural worlds are producing surplus food for the first time since liberation. We're actually ahead of pre-uprising production levels. This was one of humanity's earliest surprises for their Devourer observers. Rather than struggling to maintain alien systems they didn't understand, humans had quickly identified inefficiencies in Council resource management and implemented improvements. The authoritarian structure that had prioritized control over effectiveness was replaced by pragmatic solutions focused on actual results. Any word from the Outer Rim expeditions? Marcus asked. The exploration fleets reached 3 more abandoned Council systems this week, Sarah reported. Standard pattern, infrastructure intact but completely automated. The client species either fled or are maintaining minimal populations in hiding. This was one of the unexpected consequences of the Council's fall. Many species that had served the Empire for centuries found themselves completely dependent on alien systems they had never been allowed to understand. When Council administrators departed, these populations were left with advanced technology they couldn't operate and complex social structures they couldn't maintain. Humanity, by contrast, had been forced to understand every system they operated as slaves. Their practical knowledge of alien technology, combined with their adaptability and problem-solving skills, made them uniquely qualified to manage the transition period. But the greatest challenge wasn't technical, it was moral. The Devourers were evaluating humanity's approach to power, and every decision would be scrutinized for evidence of the same oppressive patterns that had doomed the Council. Marcus had spent countless hours in discussion with the improvised Human Leadership Council, debating policies that would demonstrate their worthiness while actually governing effectively. The solution they had developed was radical: complete transparency and voluntary participation in human administration. Every former Council world under human management was given a choice. Local populations could request human administrative support, establish their own independent government, or relocate to systems managed by their own species. No one would be forced to accept human authority, and anyone could leave at any time. The results had been surprising. Despite 50 years of seeing humans only as slaves and laborers, many alien populations chose to remain under human administration. The reasons varied, but most cited the practical competence and fairness that human administrators displayed. The Zephyrians on Kepler 438c have requested permanent human oversight of their industrial complex, Sarah continued. They say our people are the first administrators in living memory who actually understand how the systems work. This was becoming a common pattern. Alien populations that had been managed by distant Council bureaucrats for generations found human administrators refreshingly practical and responsive to local needs. More importantly, humans seemed genuinely interested in solving problems rather than simply maintaining control. The communication console chirped with an incoming transmission from the Deep Horizon, one of humanity's exploration vessels investigating abandoned systems near the Galactic Rim. Captain Jennifer Walsh appeared on the main screen, her expression a mixture of excitement and concern. "Marcus, you need to see this," she announced without preamble. "We found something at the Barnard 228 system that changes everything we thought we knew about the Devourers." "What kind of something?" Marcus asked, feeling a familiar tension that had become constant since humanity assumed responsibility for galactic governance. "Evidence that this isn't the first time they've done this," Jennifer replied. "The system contains ruins of at least 3 different civilizations, dating back millions of years. All of them show signs of advanced development followed by sudden abandonment. The implications were staggering. If the Devourers had been conducting these evaluations for millions of years, then humanity was participating in a cycle that had repeated countless times throughout galactic history. More troubling was the question of what had happened to previous civilizations that had passed their evaluations. "Send us everything you found," Marcus instructed. "Full analysis and any artifacts you can safely transport." "Already compiled and transmitting," Jennifer confirmed. "But, Marcus, there's something else. We detected Devourer signatures throughout the system. I think they wanted us to find this." After the transmission ended, Marcus and Sarah stood in silence, processing the implications of this discovery. The Devourers weren't simply destructive entities or even cosmic gardeners. They were part of a system that had been operating since before any current galactic civilization existed. "They're testing more than our ability to govern," Sarah realized. "They're evaluating our capacity to handle knowledge that could fundamentally change our understanding of our place in the galaxy." Marcus nodded, understanding that humanity had reached another critical juncture in their evaluation. How they responded to this revelation would be as important as their practical governance achievements. The data from the deep horizon painted a picture of galactic history that no current civilization had imagined. The ruins showed evidence of technological development far beyond anything achieved by the Council or their client species. These weren't primitive civilizations that had been consumed for stagnation, they were advanced societies that had apparently transcended their original limitations. More intriguingly, the ruins contained what appeared to be voluntary departures rather than destruction. Infrastructure had been carefully preserved and maintained by automated systems for millions of years, as if the original inhabitants expected to return. What if the Devourers aren't destroyers or gardeners? Marcus mused as he reviewed the archaeological data. What if they're recruiters? The idea was radical but increasingly supported by the evidence. Perhaps successful civilizations didn't simply earn preservation, they earned an invitation to join something larger. The Devourers might represent a galactic community that operated on scales humanity couldn't yet comprehend. This possibility added urgency to humanity's governance efforts. If they were being evaluated for recruitment rather than simple survival, then their performance needed to demonstrate not just competence but readiness for responsibilities beyond current galactic civilization. "We need to accelerate the integration projects," Marcus decided. "If this is about proving our readiness for larger responsibilities, then we need to show we can successfully incorporate diverse populations into a stable, growing civilization." The integration projects represented humanity's most ambitious governance initiative. Rather than simply managing former Council territories as separate entities, they were working to create genuine multi-species communities based on cooperation and mutual benefit rather than hierarchical control. The early results had been promising. On worlds where humans served as coordinators rather than rulers, mixed populations were developing new forms of social organization that maximized the strengths of different species while minimizing conflicts. Trade, research, and cultural exchange were flourishing in ways that had been impossible under Council restrictions. But the true test would come when they attempted to integrate populations that had been historically antagonistic toward each other. The Council had maintained order through separation and oppression. Humanity needed to prove that cooperation was possible even between species with fundamental differences. 6 months after liberation, the first major crisis arrived in the form of the Hegemony War. 3 former Council client species had formed an alliance aimed at reclaiming their traditional territories from human administration. They viewed humanity's rapid rise from slavery to leadership as an affront to the natural galactic order. The hegemony forces were well equipped with stolen Council military technology and had the advantage of familiarity with conventional galactic warfare. Their strategy was simple: demonstrate that humans were incompetent rulers by defeating them in battle and reclaiming their former territories. Marcus found himself facing the same choice that had confronted countless civilizations throughout galactic history: respond to aggression with overwhelming force, or find an alternative that preserved the principles they claimed to represent. "Our military assets are sufficient to crush the hegemony forces," reported Admiral Sarah Kim, formerly a logistics coordinator who had become humanity's leading military strategist through necessity rather than training. "But that would require abandoning several of our core governance principles." The dilemma was precisely what Marcus suspected the Devourers were evaluating. How would humanity handle the inevitable conflicts that arose when different groups had incompatible goals? Would they fall back on the same authoritarian solutions that had characterized every previous galactic empire? What alternatives do we have? Marcus asked during an emergency session of the Human Leadership Council. Direct negotiation is impossible, Admiral Kim replied. The hegemony has rejected all communication attempts and considers human authority fundamentally illegitimate. Then, we don't negotiate with the hegemony leadership, suggested Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who had become humanity's leading expert on interspecies psychology during her years as a research facility laborer. We demonstrate to their populations that our approach offers them better outcomes than their current leaders can provide. The strategy that emerged was unprecedented in galactic military history. Rather than fighting the hegemony forces directly, humanity would demonstrate superior governance by making life measurably better for populations in contested territories. They would win the war by proving they were better rulers than the alternatives. The campaign that followed defied every convention of galactic warfare. Human forces avoided direct confrontation with hegemony military units while simultaneously implementing rapid infrastructure improvements, resource distribution networks, and conflict resolution systems in contested areas. The results were dramatic. Populations that had initially welcomed hegemony liberation from human administration quickly discovered that their original leaders offered only the same oppression and stagnation that had characterized the Council era. Meanwhile, human-administered territories showed measurable improvements in quality of life, economic opportunity, and social stability. Within 3 months, the hegemony forces found themselves fighting not just human military units but popular uprisings from their own supposed beneficiaries. The war ended not with a decisive battle but with mass defections as hegemony populations voluntarily requested human administrative protection. Unconventional solution to military conflict successfully demonstrated, came the evaluation from the devourer observers. Integration of former adversaries without punishment or retribution shows advanced understanding of sustainable governance principles. But, the greatest validation came from an unexpected source. As the hegemony war concluded, long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures approaching from the galactic rim. The entities weren't devourers, but something else entirely. First contact protocols are being initiated, the devourer communication announced. Your species has qualified for introduction to the Galactic Conclave. Preparation for expanded responsibilities will begin immediately. Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension as he processed this message. Humanity had passed their evaluation, but apparently that meant facing even greater challenges and responsibilities. The ships that arrived were unlike anything in recorded galactic history. They represented technologies and design principles that seemed to operate on different physical laws than conventional spacecraft. When communication was established, the beings who responded identified themselves as representatives of civilizations that had passed similar evaluations over millions of years. Welcome to the Conclave, the lead representative transmitted. Your species has demonstrated the essential qualities for participation in galactic civilization at the highest level. Your practical experience with multi-species governance and conflict resolution makes you valuable additions to our community. What Marcus learned in the following weeks revolutionized his understanding of galactic structure and humanity's place within it. The Conclave was a voluntary association of species that had transcended their original limitations and accepted responsibility for maintaining galactic health over geological timescales. The Devourers were their agents, tasked with identifying civilizations ready for recruitment while recycling those that had become stagnant or destructive. The ruins found by the Deep Horizon represented former Conclave members whose responsibilities had eventually taken them beyond the physical realm entirely. Your species' history of cooperation under adversity makes you ideal candidates for our most challenging assignments, the Conclave representative explained. We have been monitoring your development since your initial enslavement, impressed by your ability to maintain moral principles under extreme pressure. The invitation came with responsibilities that were both thrilling and terrifying. Humanity would be granted access to technologies and knowledge beyond their current understanding, but they would also become responsible for evaluating and guiding other emerging civilizations. 50 years ago, we were considered fit only for bondage, Marcus observed during his final communication with the Conclave representatives. How can you be certain we're ready for these responsibilities? Because you never accepted that bondage defined your potential, came the reply. Every civilization we recruit has faced similar challenges. The question is never whether you start as slaves or conquerors, but whether you can grow beyond your original circumstances. Your species has proven that adversity strengthens rather than breaks you, that cooperation is more powerful than domination, and that growth is possible even under the worst conditions. These are the essential qualities for conclave membership. Marcus looked out at the stars from the command deck of the Human Unity, watching as conclave ships began the process of establishing permanent human representation in galactic governance. In the space of 1 year, humanity had gone from slaves to leaders of a galactic empire to members of a community that spanned millions of years of civilizational development. The journey from bondage to freedom had been completed, but Marcus understood that it was really just the beginning. Humanity's greatest adventures lay ahead as they accepted responsibility for guiding other species through the same challenges they had faced. Sarah, he called to his longtime friend and colleague. Prepare a message for transmission to all human populations across the galaxy. Tell them that our real work is just beginning. As he composed the message that would inform humanity of their new responsibilities, Marcus reflected on the irony of their situation. The Galactic Council had enslaved humanity because they believed humans were suited only for bondage and labor. They had been right about human suitability for labor, but catastrophically wrong about the implications. 50 years of slavery had taught humanity the practical skills, cooperative spirit, and moral resilience that made them perfect candidates for the galaxy's highest responsibilities. The Council had meant to break humanity's spirit and reduce them to perpetual servitude. Instead, they had forged them into the ideal successors to galactic leadership. Marcus smiled as he sent the message that would begin humanity's next chapter. The galaxy was about to discover what humans could accomplish when they stopped pretending to be slaves and started acting like the leaders they had always been capable of becoming. The age of human bondage was over. The age of human responsibility for galactic civilization had begun. And, somewhere in the depths of space, former Council species who had once considered humans fit only for labor would soon be asking those same humans for guidance in transcending their own limitations. The irony was perfect, and Marcus Chen, former slave turned galactic coordinator, couldn't help but appreciate the cosmic justice of it all.